Hello, I am ASMR Vettel, and today I'm going to do a new video about my home country, the country of Norway. So today I'm going to do more of a ramble video, and it's going to focus very on Norwegian politics. And before we begin, I just want to say that I'm a very politically neutral individual, so my presentation of Norwegian politics and my comments around the current ongoing Norwegian election will be very neutral. It will be a very neutral analysis. It will not be some sort of left or right-wing propaganda stuff. It will be a neutral stuff. It will be a neutral way to assess the current situation and a neutral way of describing the Norwegian political system. Anyway, I hope you guys have had a good week, and I hope even today's video will help you relax and just give you some more insight into Norwegian culture. Let's just begin the ramble. So before we get to all the stuff of the current election cycle Norway is currently going through, let's first talk a little about Norway's political system. So our parliament is called for the Storting. What's our parliament? You know how many parliaments in different countries often have different names? Well, our parliament is called for the Storting. And because of that, our main elections are called for Stortingsvalg, essentially Stortings elections. So, and of course, in our parliament, the representatives for the various political parties sit and discuss various stuff and matters and things affecting the country, like, economy, national issues, stuff like that. The typical. We have a state leader and a head of state. The head of state is just a ceremonial, symbolic figure with very little actual power, but it's also a very unifying figure. Our head of state is a king, King Harald, who is descended from the two previous kings. He's the son of the previous king and the grandson of the king before that. And this is King Harald, and he has been king since 1991, when his father passed away. He will be succeeded by his son, Crown Prince Haakon, and who again will be succeeded by his daughter, Princess Ingrid Alexandra. She will then also be the first queen in modern Norwegian history, the day she becomes queen, most likely decades from now. That's of course assuming that the monarchy of Norway still exists by then, but I'm going to assume it does. Anyway, Norway got its first king in modern times. I'm going to stress in modern times, in 1905, back when Norway became an independent country, as it then dissolved its union with Sweden. Anyway, but that's a story for a different time. Anyway, but while the king is the head of state, the actual state leader and the one with actual leading state power in Norway is the prime minister. Our incumbent prime minister is Jonas Gahr Støre, who is also the leader of the Labour Party, the left Labour Party, and he is the incumbent prime minister, and he is running for re-election as prime minister this year. So there are 4-year terms in Norway, and usually a government will sit outwards for 4 years, but it has happened in Norwegian history that a government has collapsed. We'll get a little bit more into that later, but for now, so during our main elections, our main elections take place every 4 years. So the last main Stortingsvalg was in 2021, and it saw the left side win the election by very good margins, essentially setting the stage for our current left-wing government. The election before that was in 2017, and our current election is in 25, and the next is in 29. You get the picture. Yeah. And of course, there are various political parties on each political side. There is the left-wing parties and the conservative parties. to simplify it a little. So there are there are 4 parties on the conservative sides, and there are 5 parties on the left-wing sides. And the coalition which gets the most representatives and which crosses the 85 representatives threshold and wins the majority of parliament is the coalition that will essentially govern, more or less. Essentially, if the left-wing coalition wins the election, then the incumbent Labour Party will remain in government and govern on for most likely 4 more years. If, however, the Conservative coalition wins the election, then we may end up with a government consisting of the established Høyre Party, the main Conservative Party of Norway, and the far-right Progress Party, but possibly also with the Christian Democrats and Venstre, the Venstre Party, which is actually and Venstre translates in English to left, but it is actually a party allied with the conservatives, not with the left sides. I know, kind of confusing, but that's how it is in Norway. So the left party is essentially a centrist party, but we're allied with the conservative sides. Anyway, so there are usually 4-year governments in Norway, but now we're getting back to the wall collapsing. But governments have collapsed. In 2000, the centrist government, led by then Christian Democrat party leader Kjell Magne Bondevik, collapsed. That government had a very thin majority from the beginning, and it wasn't really that big a shock when the government of that government collapsed back in 2000. This also led to the left coalition, or the left-wing party, the left Labour Party, the Labour Party, who back then was led by, or at least had Jens Stoltenberg as a front figure, take over power for the remainder of the period. Although the left coalition did nonetheless lose the 2001 election, so Bondevik returned as prime minister for a conservative government and was prime minister from 2001 and 2005 yet again. So, he had been prime minister from 1997 to 2000, and then he returned in 2001 and was prime minister for 4 more years. Then in 2005, the left coalition, including the Labour Party, won the election, and at the time the party leader of the Labour Party was Jens Stoltenberg, the later NATO chief, the later chief of NATO, who then won the election and became prime minister, and he would stay on as prime minister for 8 years. He would then in 2013 be succeeded by leader of the Høyre, leader of the right party, Erna Solberg, the main rival of the Labour Party. And she would then go on to be prime minister for the next 8 years on behalf of a conservative government. And then 4 years ago, the current leader of the Labour Party, Jonas Gahr Støre, and the left coalition won the election, and Jonas Gahr Støre became prime minister, and he has now been prime minister for 4 years. And is now trying to get 4 new years as prime minister. That's his aim right now. In between the main elections, there are elections in Norway every 2 years, but in the election years like 2019, 2023 and 2027, there are local elections instead. So instead of determining our government, it instead determines various stuff in various local places around Norway, like in its various communes and counties and stuff like that. In the last local election in 23, the Conservatives won very overwhelmingly, and Høyre, the right party, even made sensation by becoming the biggest party, beating Labour to this. It was a massive defeat for the Labour Party. But things have changed quite a lot in 2 years' time, and now the race between the two sides are much, much tighter than it was 2 years ago, or for that matter 4 years ago. As 4 years ago, during the last main election, the left side was leading great, and of course won the election by very good margins too. But this year things are far more tighter and more uncertain. But we're getting into that now. we're getting into it now. Okay, so I ramble a little now about the structure of everything. I know, very nerdy, but this is a video for people who are interested in how things work in Norway. Now, I'm going to talk a little now about the current election stuff before we get into it, and the various parties competing in this election. Be aware that in Norway, and this is especially relevant if you are someone from a more conservative country. I know a lot of the English-speaking countries have a tendency to be a little more conservative in culture. Be aware that in Norway, the political spectrum lies further to the left. This is your left. Lies further to the left side. So that means that things like socialism and stuff like that has a greater influence in Norwegian politics than what is usual in more English-speaking countries. But I'm going to introduce you to the various parties from the far left to the far right, and trust me, Norway does have a far left, but it also has the far right. Now, I'm going to begin with the established parties. Yeah, by the way, I had to just scratch because it was a little scratch in my neck there. So, anyway, I'm going to introduce you to the main parties competing in the election. First, I'll begin with the two biggest main established parties. There is the Labour Party, which has dominated Norwegian politics ever since like Second World War and after. And this is the leading party on the left side. And the left coalition have only one prime minister candidate, and that is the leader for this party. That is Jonas Gahr Støre, who became party leader in 2014, back when Jens Stoltenberg, the former leader of the Labour Party and former prime minister, became chief of NATO. Jonas Gahr Støre has often been a somewhat controversial party leader. A lot of people have often felt he hasn't inspired, he hasn't been in touch with the people, but he has had positive periods too, and right now he is in a more positive period again. There have been a lot of talk and attempts to replace Støre over the last 11 years, but all of them has actually flopped. There was a very serious attempt like now in December 24, but that flopped too. I'm going to get more into that. Støre is at least the leader and prime minister candidate for the left-wing coalition, and he was that for the last two elections too. He lost in 2017, but he won in 21 and then became prime minister. So we'll see which side he ends up this year, whether he ends up losing again or whether he ends up winning. We don't know yet. The polls are very tight after all. So, but Støre has often been controversial, and now we're getting into one of the things about Norwegian culture. Back in the old days, the Labour Party used to be led by, it's called the Labour Party after all, by workers and people with more working background. But back in 1980s, it changed a little, and the party started to become led a little bit more by academics and stuff like that. But Jonas Gahr Støre becoming party leader was quite controversial at the time for one reason. He is a millionaire, he's from a very wealthy family, and a lot of people in Norway, and this is a thing about Norwegian culture, especially on the left side of the political spectrum, didn't get entirely how a man like Støre, who was born wealthy and raised wealthy, could represent a party like the Labour Party. They wouldn't mind it if he was a conservative, then they wouldn't question it, but on the left side, this part was more controversial. However, because in 21, because the conservatives had been incumbents back then for 8 years, and people wanted change, as they often do after 8 years in a democracy, Støre and the left started leading polls and won the election. But as prime minister, he has often been criticized for not doing enough, for not handling the economy well enough, and stuff like that. However, in recent months, things have really turned around for him, and he has now become far more popular again than he was just a few months ago. Back in December, things were so bad that there were people in the Labour Party who conspired to have Støre replaced as party leader and prime minister candidate for this election. They wanted to replace him with the crown princess of the Labour Party, Tonje Brenna, who is also one of the ministers in government. She's part of a younger generation, and she is She is one of the two main, considered one of the two most likely successors to Støre as party leader sometime later. It's her or Jan Christian Vestre, or Hans Christian Vestre, what I don't know. It is her or Vestre that are the most popular potential successors to Støre, that they Støre assigns as party leader. So they could also be future party leaders, prime minister candidates, and even possible prime ministers, and could be future leaders of the left coalition and Labour Party. Vestre is also a minister in government, but like Støre, he is also from a wealthy family. Brenna, on the other hand, has some more people-like background, and it was her that the people who wanted to perform this party coup wanted to replace Støre with, but the coup completely flopped, and Støre remained prime minister candidate and party leader. It was not a well-executed coup, it was actually, it was just like, it just flopped. So Støre remained party leader and prime minister candidate, and now the election is in 2 weeks' time. In 2 weeks' time. On a side note, Brenna and Vestre, the two younger ones, are actually survivors of the 2011 terrorist attack on the Labour youth camp, which is one of the most awful events in Norwegian history. Back in 2011, a far-right radical lunatic guy bombed the government headquarters, and on the 20th of July 2011, and then disguised himself as a police officer and took a boat to the Labour Party youth camp area and started shooting the youths there. And a lot of youths, teenagers of the Labour Youth Party died that day. The man was arrested, He had been impersonating a police officer to sort of get to the island and do this. And the man was arrested and was made a trial. And this was essentially Norway's 9/11, because there were many people who died that day. There were also a few people who died in the government bombing, So the man was arrested, and afterwards the security at the island and around the government headquarters has of course been tightened, so that this will never happen again, so that no person later can just disguise himself as a police officer and drive on a boat to the island and start shooting people. The security has been really tightened after this. It's not an incident which is a happy day in Norwegian history. It's one of the worst days in Norwegian history. It's our 9/11. Anyway, but that was just a side note. I just want to point it out because these two are actually survivors of that incident. So I just want to include a slight bit of Norwegian history in there, of more recent Norwegian history. But moving on from that, we are now getting to the other main party, the Conservative Party, which we in Norway call for Høyre, right. The Conservative Party is led by Erna Solberg. She has been leader for more than 20 years, since 2004, I believe. And she has been prime minister candidate for this party for a lot of elections. In 2005, I believe, and in 2009, in 13, in 17, in 21. And she has both won and lost elections. And now she's running again, but she used to be really, really popular. Back in the 2010s, she was super popular prime minister candidate. She was a really big favorite, and with slogans like "Erna is the star," "Erna er stjernen," as we say to Norwegian. She was really popular and unifying figure for the Norwegian people. But now, in recent years, things have collapsed for her in popularity. She's no longer the popular candidate she was. She 2 years ago, she was caught in a scandal in relation to her husband, and it was sort of a scandal about her husband having participated in lots of dubious investments, and that scandal sort of did damage her a little, but she did survive as party leader after all. However, now she's just not inspiring anymore, and it may be the scandal, it may be other factors, but nonetheless, she's really struggling, and the party is struggling. A lot of people believe that her time as party leader is soon going to be up, and that a new party leader is going to come. And the favorite right now is The clear favorite to succeed her is Ine Eriksen, the former Minister of Foreign Affairs. I believe that's what she was. And she is the favorite to succeed Erna Solberg as party leader. And a lot of people in the right party now believes that the right party needs a new leader because we're not doing well in polls now ahead of election. But she's not the only prime minister candidate we see on the Conservative side. There is also Sylvi Listhaug, the party leader of the far-right Progress Party, who could actually potentially become the first prime minister from this party in Norwegian history. There has never been a party leader from the Progress Party before. The Progress Party was back in the 1980s and 1990s and 2000s and 1970s, I believe, at least the late 1970s, led by a man called Carl Ivar Hagen. He was back at the time a very controversial man because he stood for very far-right policies. So he was met by a very divided response among the Norwegian population. He was never close to becoming prime minister, but he led the far-right Progress Party for decades and sort of laid the fundamentals for the Progress Party's rise and later successes. After that, he was succeeded by a woman called Siv Jensen, who actually led the far-right Progress Party into government for the first time in 2013. She became Minister of Finance and entered coalition with the established Right Party. The established Right Party and Erna Solberg got the Prime Minister. She became the Finance Minister, which is sort of the next to most powerful position in Norway. The far-right Progress Party was in coalition with the Right Party for like 6.5 years, but in early 2020 they left the government, mostly because the polls were declining, because the far-right party had been in government for a long time. They had, according to, they believed it at least at the time, but for many of the voter boys, they had become too established. And remember, this is a party, but it's on the far right. So they left the government and returned to opposition and to sort of try and revive the party. And but of course, they did pay a price in the 2021 election for all these years in government. Shortly before last election, Sylvi Listhaug, the current leader, became became party leader. She is now also one of the prime minister candidates, one of the 3 prime minister candidates of this election. Not officially, but unofficially. She's being a little careful not to officially call herself that, to not scare away voters in a way, but she is sort of unofficially that, and she could very well be Norway's next prime minister if the Conservatives win the election, but the polls are super tight. She used to be a minister in the Conservative government and a very prominent member of the Conservative coalition years ago, back when the Conservatives had power. But she was also very controversial at the time. She is more far-right than Norwegians are used to. But for this election, she has actually moderated a little to try to appeal to more voters and improve her chances of becoming prime minister. Of course, her challenge has been selling the ideals of the far-right to a people, Norwegians, who are often more left-oriented. But she has actually seen a rise in polls, especially among younger men. Although she has often been the third preferred choice among prime ministers. The favorite in prime minister polls have often been incumbent Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre. Still, there's no denying that she has seen a rise in polls recently, as has the Progress Party. And the Progress Party has in many polls been bigger than the Right Party, which is a major turnaround on the conservative sides. Of course, the established Conservative Party is a little rocked by the fact that the Labour Party and the far-right Progress Party are both stealing voters from it, and that also contributes to the decline of the main Right Party. You know, the Right Party had actually years ago stolen a few of the voters from the Labour Party, but now in recent months the Labour Party has taken those voters back, and people on the Conservative side who have been a little disillusioned by the established Conservative Party have perhaps instead gone to the far-right Progress Party. But these are perhaps the biggest parties competing in the election, but there are a few other parties too. I'm rambling a lot now, I know it's like, apologies, my throat is getting dry, but I wanted to ramble. There are the Christian Democrats, which is, as the name suggests, a Christian conservative party. They used to be far, far bigger in the past than they are now, but they're still relevant and could still be an important factor in the election in terms of determining whether the Conservatives or the left-wing coalition win. There is the more green-orientated party, the Left Party, which are allied with the Conservatives. Then there is the left-wing coalition parties, the Centrist Party, which is sort of the agrarian party, but they're allied with the left side, and they were in coalition with the Labour Party until just a few months ago, when they left government. There is the Green Party, MDG, Miljøpartiet De Grønne, as we say in Norwegian, the Green Party, and they were, back in the 2010s, they were really surging, and they were both popular and controversial at the same time. Many people like it, but they put focus on the climate, while other people found them radical. And they were a very controversial party at the time. But now in the 2020s, their appeal has waned a little as the issues and focus has become about different things than climate. Then there is the Socialist Left Party, which is sort of a party which was formed, like, I believe, back in the 1960s or something like that, and it consists of people who felt like the Labour Party was too established and not left or socialist enough. And then on the far left we have the Red Party, and the Red Party are the successors to the old Communist Party. They have also actually seen a surge in recent years. The Red Party used to be smaller, but they have surged in recent years. They have tried to drop the communist label and moderate themselves a little to appeal to more voters, but they of course have a lot of the old communist ideals in the party. So today Norway's elections and politics isn't that divisive, but let's imagine in the future what the Red Party and the far-right Progress Party, the far-left Red Party and the far-right Progress Party became the biggest parties, then Norwegian elections could suddenly become far more divisive, because then we would on the one hand have a party with communist ideals, and on the other hand have a party with far-right ideals. So yeah, but we are not there right now, just to be clear, we are not there right now. That's just me speculating a little about what potentially could happen decades into the future. Anyway, so these are some of the parties competing in the elections. But the polls are super tight for this election. It's super tight. The lefts are like slight favorites, but there are some polls where the rights have been leading to. So the challenge for the right side, the Conservative coalition, is what we're trying to oust a government who has been in power for only 4 years. After 8 years, it is often easy to oust a government. After 8 years, people want change. And a year ago, it actually looked like people would want change after just 4 years, because a year ago, the left party, the leftist government, wasn't popular. The Conservatives were leading overwhelming in polls, and everyone was certain that the Conservatives were going to march to a landslide victory when everything changed. In February 25, everything changed. First of all, the centrist party left government, so the Labour Party remained on their own in government, still with the support of the other left parties, but including the centrist party, but on their own, and this enabled them to sort of do more the policies they prefer to do. And then, of course, Jens Stoltenberg retired as chief of NATO, and he returned to Norway as Minister of Finance. And Jens Stoltenberg is a super popular man in Norway. He was super popular as party leader and prime minister too, and he has really helped boost the polls of the Labour Party and the left. So all of this has, and of course there are some Norwegians who are a little concerned with the situation in the world, including with the war in Ukraine and stuff, and a lot of these lean to the left. But then there are Norwegians who are more concerned with rising crime levels, immigration and economy, and they often lean more to the right, the Conservatives. By the way, this is your right, and this is your left. Apologies, I'm going off from my right. But yeah, anyway. So it's like, yeah. So in recent months, the polls have turned, and while the far-right Progress Party has surged in polls, the established right Høyre Party has collapsed in polls. And because of that, because of all these factors, the election have become super tight. With the left being slight favorites, and with Jonas Gahr Støre being the favorite of the Prime Minister candidates, but with also the right Conservatives leading in some polls. So we do not know what will happen after the election. Should the Conservatives win, we do not know if it will be the far-right Progress Party Listhaug leader who will be Prime Minister, or whether it will be Erna Solberg, because after while the Progress Party may become the biggest party on the Conservative side, after the election there will have to be negotiations and compromises, and this could mean that Erna Solberg could potentially become Prime Minister even though her party doesn't do well because of these negotiations and compromises, which the Progress Party may have to do. You know, if the Progress Party want a Prime Minister, then they will have to make major concessions to the other parties in the Conservative coalition to get the Prime Minister. And the question is, are we willing to do that? Because that could involve disappointing some of the voter base and backtracking on some of the core promises they have made after all. The far-right Progress Party is, of course, focusing a lot more on focusing a little on education, but also on immigration and crime levels. The left Labour Party is focusing on the sort of foreign situation, the situation in the world, and sort of and they're also trying to, of course, scare people away from voting a far-right party. Whereas the established right party is focusing more on normal, regular conservative parties. So for a lot of people on the left, they do not want to see far-right leader Syvi Listhaug as Prime Minister, but a lot of people on the Conservatives do not want 4 more years with the left and Jonas Gahr Støre as Prime Minister. This is, of course, typical political stuff, with divided opinions on each side. That said, it should be said one thing: there is mutual respect between the various party leaders in Norway, regardless. Norway is not a very politically divided country, and at the end of the day, people will not feel a major change in their lives, no matter who becomes Prime Minister, because no matter who becomes Prime Minister, that person will have to compromise with others. Jonas Gahr Støre will actually have to compromise with the far left-red party. Høyre, if they get the Prime Minister, will have to compromise with the far-right Progress Party, and the far-right Progress Party, if they get the Prime Minister, will have to compromise with the other conservative parties on the conservative sides. So because of that, to be honest, people will probably not feel like a super major change in their life, no matter who becomes Prime Minister, because the system is built in a way which means that the Prime Minister isn't all powerful. So there will be compromises and negotiations regardless of how this plays out. And it's likely that no matter who will win, it will be difficult for that person to govern. Because of, as it always is, it will be a challenge to govern anyway. The easy party is often winning an election. The difficult party is governing, because as much as some of these probably want to just deliver on all their promises, in practice and in reality, that is almost impossible. Because there are a lot of the promises that just aren't very realistic and that just can't be executed realistically, because you have to navigate through a very bureaucratic system after all. So yeah. Should the left win the election now? Should Jonas Gahr Støre be re-elected? When they remain in power for 4 years without collapsing, then it is likely that the Conservatives will be big favorites in 29. Should, however, the right win the election, then the 29 election could be far more uncertain, especially if the Progress Party gets the Prime Minister. So, I ramble a lot now, but now I'm almost done. But it's been fun rambling. A little different video from what I usually do. But this week I'm doing somewhat different videos than what I usually do. So that's been a little fun. So, the left and Jonas Gahr Støre has seen a resurgence in popularity now in recent months, but if they win, they will once again have to govern, and once again, people may be potentially disappointed with it, or it may be they manage to improve on the previous period and learn from the mistakes of the previous period. It can go both ways. Similarly, the Progress Party could potentially impress their voter base by getting the Prime Minister or by delivering on key issues. Or they could disappoint their voter base because they have to make all these compromises with other parties. And the same goes for the established right party. Like they could impress people by making some change, trying to improve the economy, stuff like that. Or they could struggle just as much as the left government and again disappoint people. This is kind of how politics work. In elections, often the party leaders go around promising this big revolutionary change, but when the election comes and goes, and when the government starts, and it won't be anything revolutionary. It will just be daily stuff as usual, no matter who becomes prime minister. So, I know, a little anticlimactic, but that's how Norwegian politics work. Anyway, I hope I today gave you insight into the Norwegian political system and into how things in Norway are. And we'll see who wins the election. It's very uncertain. In the latest polls, the left's coalition was slightly surging ahead, but there have been polls where the right coalition have taken the lead too. So things are very up in the air now. But in 2 weeks, on Monday, Norwegians that evening will get the answer on whether it is the left coalition or the right coalition who will govern for the next 4 years. Okay, hope you enjoyed today's video, and all the best to you, and hope you just enjoyed. All the best to you. All the best.